Welcome to my YouTube channel. You have just tuned into a Better Black America TV hosted by yours truly, Bushaun Glover. That's B-U-H-A-U-N. Now, we got to talk some Trump news today. You know, Trump is becoming the president that a lot of us never thought that he would. I'm just giving credit where credit is due, because Trump overstepped the governor of Los Angeles, a governor of the state of California, as well as the mayor of Los Angeles. And we're dawning where we really got to have a conversation and understand that a house divided can't stand, because for me, it's the strangest thing for the federal government to not be aligned with local and state government. That's the part that gets me, because Gavin Newsom, you know, he has declared himself as the enemy of the president of the United States. And a lot of individuals are speaking behind the scenes since Gavin Newsom has termed out. Okay, he has termed out, just like a lot of people want term limits for our senators and our Congress. But Gavin Newsom has termed out, and it seems like he's gone rogue against the president of the United States for sending in federal troops to Los Angeles. And it makes you think, because common sense says if there's a threat, if there's some intelligence, if we were to deploy law enforcement officers in the military, it means that we are purposely trying to de-escalate a situation. And when I say de-escalate a situation, I mean that by the framework of the more support you have, the better you putting yourself in position, because LA is the mecca of protesting. LA is the mecca of the rioting. If you kick a riot off here in Los Angeles, California, then that means, you know, it gives motivation, you know, to the evildoers in high places. It gives motivation to the antagonists. It gives motivation to the individuals around the country. So since they burned LA down, now we're going to just go ahead and burn down our cities, but not so fast. And I got to applaud the president of the United States for being proactive. But my common sense says, being a contractor with the Department of Defense in my prior career, I understand that there was some intelligence that the federal government was privy to, and they pushed it up to the presidential level. This is why President Trump signed off on deploying not only the National Guard, but deploying the Marines. Now, you have Marines and Humvees and the National Guard here in LA staged to support, to make sure that this thing does not continue, or this thing does not pop like a pimple. But it hurt my heart when I seen the mayor of Los Angeles. It hurt my heart during the press conferences on the, I believe, the second or third night, or the second night, when they found out that Trump was sending in the National Guard and the Marines. She said out of her mouth that he is throwing flame fire, that he is making the situation worse. And I thought to myself, that is literally impossible. If there's a threat, the more law enforcement that you have, the better. And then she said the day after, okay, when she declared a city emergency, when she put in a curfew after they burned up, looted, vandalized federal, they asked her a question about the National Guard, and she went on record and said, the National Guard, all they're doing is just, what did she say? They're just protecting the federal building like it was nothing. And I said, the federal building that the National Guard was protecting, the prior days or the prior nights before that the National Guard was deployed, they had to put the federal prison or the federal jail down on Temple and Alameda lockdown. So that means everybody that works at that federal jailing system had to put on, had to uniform up, had to arm up, had to, put on that tactified equipment, because now to protect this building, they vandalizing. They're putting graffiti all over. They're trying to burn things. So they put the jail on lockdown, meaning the inmates, and life and property is so important when law enforcement. Life and property is the main two things that's protected. Life of the inmates were subjected because the law enforcement officers or the federal correctional officers had to mount up and go to the building. So now that the National Guard is there defending the building, so now that they could do their job. And think about it. It worked because the last 2 nights been mouse. And yesterday they started arresting individuals during the daytime. They attempted to block the 101 freeway. The CHP came full throttle. The paddy wagons came out. The county jail, they locked them all up. And I'm telling you, if you don't know LA, East downtown LA, you got East LA, you got Boyle Heights. You know, you got different areas where a large Hispanic population lives. And living in that area, they pretty much walked across the bridge and protested. But now the federal troops, LAPD, Sheriff's Department, CHP, have enough manpower to push them east of downtown LA. And I saw an individual who had a bike and they pretty much just walked home. But the individuals that wanted to be a part of this operation that had nothing to do with it, you know, white women, black people, they're basically saying, hey, we live on the other side of the 110. We got to head back west. And as they headed back west, they all got caught up with law enforcement, faces blasted on television, and found themselves behind bars. So this protest in which the mayor said is peaceful, that's a lie. This protest in which Karen Bass said was peaceful, that's a lie. You know, and maybe the sound Karen Bass or Maxine Waters was speaking. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who was denied access to the federal location that she tried to enter. The door was slammed in her face. And when I saw that, I sit back and I said, well, we got two tiers. Because how can you disrespect a congresswoman? Call her Auntie Maxine in the community. But all of a sudden, she's getting doors slammed in her face. And then she did a press conference and said that she was out there and these are peaceful protests. And it pretty much, that's where she lost me. Because there's nothing peaceful about burning vehicles. There's nothing peaceful about blocking major freeways. The 110, the 5, the 1. Nothing's peaceful about that. The driverless, fare vehicles, the driverless autonomous vehicles like taxis here in LA, like 6 of them down. And then vandalizing the city as if we are some type of third world country. So what I'm saying is a house divided cannot stand. And this is my point of today's conversation. Okay, it's Trump news. Trump is winning. You know, no disrespect to individuals who, don't like Trump, but and I'm gonna get back to it. A deal was cut yesterday with China in terms of the tariffs with natural earths and metals and magnets. Okay, still making deals. But these grand distractions that were, Elon went rogue on Trump, but all of a sudden he apologized because he stepped a little bit, too far. So we got to understand what's going on. The house divided cannot stand. You got the governor of the state of California and the mayor of Los Angeles saying stop the ICE raids. And when I say stop the ICE raids, Mayor Bass was having a press conference and they said, what do you want the president to do? She said, stop the raids. But you got to understand, the president ran on immigration. The president ran on the first term about building a wall, but somehow, some way, the Democrats made sure that there was no wall built, that more immigrants, more migrants from wherever country they came from, if you get to that southern border, we'll bring you to the United States. You could go to these sanctuary cities, and California being one of them, or sanctuary states or sanctuary cities, Frisco, right here. So now you find yourself in a situation. Now he's elected president. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm seeing a president do what he said he was going to do. He said he ran on immigrants. The southern border is shut down. They don't even need to build it because, the crossing of the border, of the southern border, is at its lowest than it's been ever documented or counted. Didn't for that. You just needed the, Border Patrol to do their jobs. And you have LA, the sanctuary city. who's going through funding and, $1 billion in the rate from a budget perspective. And now we're sitting back, seeing our mayor not support or not respect the federal government. Now, on a prior podcast, I basically said if I was Gavin Newsom, when I found out after the fact that federal troops was being, to my state to pretty much put out the fire in LA that I'm not willing to do, I got to have a conversation. But he can't have a conversation with the president. They had a conversation. The president showed his call log. One was for 4 seconds when he left, when Newsom didn't answer. And then they spoke for 16 minutes and he showed the call log. And he told Gavin Newsom, stop the riot in LA. And maybe Newsom didn't understand. And in his mind, it's controlled chaos. Basically, I'll stop it when it becomes a riot, because it's not a riot at this time. It's just a peaceful protest with a little civil unrest. So the president basically said, listen, you're not going to do your job. I'm going to do your job, and send federal troops to the city of Los Angeles without the knowing. And that's another slap in the face from a mayor's perspective, because she should be in the loop. If she's under the governor and the governor's not working with the federal government, then maybe she should talk to the president or have a cabinet member or have a member on her team that will go into the lion's den and speak to Trump personally, for the city of Los Angeles. And if she were to open up the election process, I'm the perfect person to do it for you. Okay. You know me, people that I know work in your office, Mayor Bass. So have them get at me, and I will be the ambassador or the liaison from Los Angeles to speak to them, because we are in the red when it comes to a budget. We're over budget and overstaffed when it comes to all the overtime that's these officers are working. The federal government, they're going to get paid no matter what. Okay, we're talking about LAPD and the sheriffs. So we need more funding. And where do you get the funding from? You go to the state, but since the state is tripping, why not go to Caesar himself and say, then we're going to stop these protests. And I know that you're looking forward to the World Cup, and then we got the Olympics coming up. So let's get on the same page, sir. Play the game. But no. You guys are decided to go the wrong. So now you got individuals like myself saying, man, I got to step up, figure out what we going to do, because our state and local government have failed the people. They were willing these protests to become riots. Okay. And as a citizen of Los Angeles, California, who was a rioter in 1992, this is not a riot. Okay, this is the notion that I want to break down. Here in Los Angeles, there is no riot. Okay, riots are widespread. Okay, riots are widespread. I have not saw one building burned down. Not a one. Not a federal building. Not any of the commercial buildings downtown, because President Trump sent those troops and nipped it in the bud before it can actually happen. And it seems like, it's some type of controlled chaos, and Bass and Newsom is on some type of operation with the opposition. Because when I look at the governor sit back and say that, we're going to stop Trump, or we're going to stop, the federal agents from being in our community, like, it's your troops who work for you. And if you did not know, the federal FBI has opened up investigations to basically seek and find out who's funding these protests. Because the protest era is, okay, these protests we're not going to burn down any cities. We're not going to destroy the momentum that we have. We are not going to allow the Democratic Party to work in cahoots together that we destroy. We're looking for peace, and peace comes with love and understanding. So with that peace, love, and understanding, it comes with compensation. So how we, debunk the theory that, trickle down economics does not work if we continue to do the things or be a part of the rudiments that actually make sure that these things don't work. Okay. Because like I said, trickle down politics do work, because we can't have a tear down. Usually every 10 years, riots and things like this happen. But now we just had this 4 years ago. And the Democratic Party, what did they do? They supported to defund the police. The Democratic Party, what did they do? They were bailing out the agitators. And what it's looking like and what the data is that the Democratic elected officials are a part of the opposition of the United States, which make them anti-American. And this is why the Democratic Party as a whole, democracy is dying. And I'm going to say this. The Democratic Party's democracy is dying. America is a constitutional republic, to the republic for which it stands. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for everybody. All y'all. So now when we can try to, allow these Democratic elected officials, listen, the jig is up. You guys were trying to start or allow riots to happen in Los Angeles, California, and then this weekend spark riots all over the United States, just like y'all did when George Floyd was murdered, Eric Chauvin in Minneapolis. Think about that. It's not going to happen. The Summer of Love 2020, it's not going to happen again. Okay, there's a president that's in charge that understands that proactive is better than reactive. And when he made the decision to send the troops to LA, the Marines, the National Guard, okay, when he made that decision, do you not think that he has advisors advising him on what he should do based on the intelligence that now I understand, you organizations, you nonprofits, we're going to protest, but you guys have been infiltrated. There's no such thing as a peaceful protest. You guys get out there and protest agitators. You ever wonder where Antifa, where did Antifa go? These anarchists, these individuals that want to just take an opportunity to tear down. This is what they do. And this is why there are no peaceful the protest era is over, because to stop something in the bud, you in the troops. And then Gavin Newsom, posted a picture of the troops, of the Marines, sleeping, in a situation where it looked like they were uncomfortable. But you got to understand, the Marines, these individuals been deployed to Iraq, Iran, they built tents, they fought on foreign nations and foreign soil, so they're comfortable. It is what it is. The American people, we see what we see, and we got to believe what we see. And this is why we got to step out on faith and let them do what they do. Because the Democratic Party as a whole, Gavin Newsom has to get out there, because the individuals that funds his campaign, funds his options, his surrogates, the people that work, behind the scenes, that basically give him his talking points. Those individuals are the opposition of these elitist few, the one percenters, the individuals that want to capitalize off of anything when it happens. They burn the candles from both sides. But this is why Karen Bass, the managers, and the governor are pretty much promoting an agenda outside of the federal government. But when you talk to the police chief, when you talk to the sheriff, they sit back and say the only thing negative that they have to say is that we don't know their operations. Because I've seen so many press conferences where they pretty much basically said the National Guard arrived, since the Marines have arrived, since Bass was forced to declare a city emergency, put in a curfew, this thing pretty much overnight has just shut down. You got a few people out there, a few peaceful protesters, waving, American flag, Mexican flag, whatever you want to call it, but they're not burning nothing. They're not booty, because those individuals are getting locked up. Okay. And somebody liar in the comment, hey, I don't have a lying bone in my body. And if I lie, it's not purposely. And if I lie, call me out on my lie. Okay, and that is Brandon. So Brandon, if I'm lying, tell me what I'm lying about so I can give you some type of clarity. Because at the end of the day, a divided house can't stand. The federal government, the president of the United States, should not be the opposition of California and the mayor of Los Angeles. Think about that. And this is why that's treasonous. That's going against America. Because like I said, Gavin Newsom, if you were smart, man, you would go and apologize and go ahead and take Karen Bass with you and go have a press conference down there with Donald Trump. Because that's how you win when you're dealing with your enemy. I'm going to just give you some game. You keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So Gavin Newsom, you guys need to take a trip to Washington and have this conversation. Seeing individuals, he's cutting deal with China, President Xi. He brought in the South African president who's, in South Africa, the blacks are genocide and getting rid of the white farmers, and they got to send private planes to get out of South Africa. And he gets a chance to come to Washington and sit with the president of the United States and have a conversation, hard conversation, but then sit back and say, but we can utilize some resources. We can utilize the support of the United States because the world would be better if we're friends. These are foreign enemies. Everybody checking in. These terrorists kicked into play. Taiwan, popped up. Taiwan, we're going to make chips in Phoenix, Arizona. We're going to invest $200 billion. Toyota has stepped up. Nissan has stepped up. Honda building, factories in Louisiana and Georgia, still building the parts for cars just to say, keep the cars cheap so they don't have to pay the tariffs. Why we can't cut a deal? We right here on America. And the sad thing about it is, only time that these things happen is when the Democratic Dixiecratic South wanted to preserve slavery. And this is why they had it. This is why they was at odds with federal government, Abraham Lincoln at the time, because Abraham Lincoln wanted to emancipate or free the slaves, but he only emancipated the slaves, which is just a public announcement and some documentation. Because based on what happened, the Vagrancy Act of 1866 pretty much, is the data or the information that make it clear that slavery never ended, because that's the Vagrancy Act, meaning if you was a newly, they could just round you up, put a ball and chain on your ankle and force you to perform involuntary servitude. And now it's in the prisons. Okay. Because the 13th Amendment reads neither slavery nor voluntary servitude unless criminalized. And if they criminalize you, you ain't nothing but a slave. Okay, if you in the South right now, you picking oranges, tobacco, you out there in the fields with stripes on, with a police, with your trustee, bootlegging trust horse with a shotty. Make sure that you working as a slave. And if you are in some type of city or municipal, you're getting paid what, 8 cents, 13 cents an hour? Okay, that's involuntary servitude. That's slavery. So back to nature at hand. How can America thrive when we're divided? How can you not be friends with the president of the United States? I don't care how you feel about a man. The Bible says it's not flesh and blood. It's powers, principalities, evildoers in high places. So when we look at and sit back, and the analysts look back and sit back and say what's really going on, because the powers and principalities and evildoers in high places on the Democratic side, they are ones that are in control. They are the ones that are in control. And that's real. And the channel is, somebody put, what's this channel? It's a Better Black America TV, meaning, we're getting as a black man in the community, we getting our blank together and we're standing up and we're going to help this country become a beautiful nation. Okay, because here at a Better Black America TV, we seek some resolutions to create a better world. Because if we could change the hoods and the barrio into communities, recycling dollars with resources and become, an asset versus a liability, the United States would be a beautiful place. What this channel is all about. But right now, I'm having a conversation about the President Trump news. This is what I call it, about President Trump being, the opposition of Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom in time crisis. Because I'm sitting back, looking at why the governor or why the mayor would have a problem with the federal government stepping in and helping out and making sure these protests do not turn into riots. Contrary to popular, no matter what you look at on the news, this is not a riot. Okay, this is what we call a civil unrest or a public disturbance. Now, I'm gonna say that again, a civil or public disturbance, because riots are citywide. Like I said, I was in my college years when, the Rodney King verdict came through. We rioted. Okay, it was a beautiful gang truce. Tore the city down. Them really think and understand what's really going on. But based on that data, the federal government is not going to allow that to happen. And then the summer of love of 2020, everybody saw what happened with George Floyd and, all over the United States of America, all these protests and then these agitators and all of that was going on. So now that's not going to happen. So before they could even start this thing off, before they can even get to the weekend, because this weekend they already had planned protests. So these nonprofit organizations, these liberal nonprofit organizations are using their resources and their fundings to fund protests, not help the people, not invest their dollars in education, not to invest in stopping crime, not to invest in stopping poverty, not to invest in stopping the homeless situation. They're using their nonprofit dollars to basically fund protests, which they want to turn into riots. Because the evildoers in high places sit back and it turns them on to see a city being burned down, especially if it's, done by the individuals that's on their team, because that's their job and that's their orders. So now Gavin Newsom have pretty much said, hey, we will stop you. So the individuals that's against the federal government, the individuals or entities that's going against, the National Guard, the Marines, local jurisdictions in terms of the California Highway Patrol, the sheriff's, LAPD, those individuals have a boss. Those individuals work for somebody. And the question is, who are they? Kendrick Lamar won a Grammy on the #1 song, was They Not Like Us. So they are not like us because those individuals have no love for this country. Those individuals want to burn this country down because they don't want happy individuals. They don't want unity. They don't want oneness. They want to continue to race bait because, like I said, if we could end racism, then it will be one race, and that's the human race. And these United States of America, like I said, it's a God-fearing constitutional republic. To the republic is one nation under God. So as partisan independent, as a liaison and an ambassador to Black American and human affairs in the United States, this is why we got to get in front of this, is because they don't want us to do our job. They don't want us to fix the problem. They don't want us to find the antidote to what's really going on, because they get paid off of chaos. They get problems. They get paid off of all of these things. Just look at the pharmaceutical industry. They don't find cures. They just find things that allow you to deal with the problems. Because if they found a cure, then what's the purpose? Think about that. Think about that. Just think about if we ended poverty, then what would be the purpose of these nonprofit organizations that, get funding to feed hungry people? The system, Gavin Newsom said he's not investing any money into something that does not work, because the city of Los Angeles have went through $75 million in homeless funding. And when they did the census, there's more homeless people today than it was before they gave out the resources. Where did the money go? But the Bass administration, the mayor, they're not going to get audited. They don't want to get audited. They're not going to open the books. Even phone calls and text messages being deleted. Because if you didn't know, this past January, we dealt with some historic fires. And then come to find out, no water in the reservoirs. Come to find out, the staff. Come to find out, they got rid of the police, the LA fire chief, because she wasn't willing to lie and play the game, with the doers in high places who funds the Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass. So they fired her. And then all of a sudden, here we are right now. So how they can actually justify funds in Congress. So just imagine if Trump didn't do what he did and allowed the city to down. And then next thing you know, those paid agitators go to another city and then they're down one by one. Could you imagine how the federal government will have to kick in and utilize the resources to pretty much fix them instead of spreading the wealth? Now I can understand why a lot of the funding, is gone. Department of Education, USAID, they found, in the social security industry, people getting social security, that's 198-year-old, They found 1.9 million individuals that's basically getting a Social Security check cut on a bi-weekly basis. It's not even alive. And this is why or how they won that election, because those 9 million individuals that's not even alive, when they sent out all the mail-in ballots for the 2020 presidential election, they was able to take those and swing it how they wanted to swing it. And this is why when they say the election stolen, they'll sit back and say, oh, there's no evidence of widespread. What about evidence of no spread? We know what happened, and what they did, they stopped what's going on right now. So that was their last days, okay? Because after the Civil War, Robert E. Lee and guys, they wrote a book, what they call the Lost Cause. And we've been dealing with the Lost Cause since 1865. The Democratic Party of Democrat past ain't nothing but a ghost. So they pretty much give you the tools to destroy yourself. So now that we realize that, we can't use those tools to destroy ourselves. And that's the point that I'm making today. The government, federal government, state and local. See, state and local benefits and feeds off of county jail, prison, chaos, the whole nine. The state feeds off of all of this. And somehow we found ourselves billions of dollars in the red when it comes to a budget. Mayor Bass, and she pretty much stated that the city of Los Angeles is, 1.2 or 1.3 billion dollars in the negative. And she went to Gavin Newsom to pretty much have a conversation. He pretty much the building. So now we're sitting here in a catch-22 situation. So we get funds. How do we justify? Oh, let's go ahead and go to our normal play. Let's just tear the city down and burn it down. And then, everybody is pretty much stagnant. But the president of the United States stopped it. Okay. And I'm telling you, I can't give President Trump the credit for sending in the troops, because he has advisors. You got a CIA who have intelligence, the FBI and CIA, the NS, who basically, got confidential informants. They know what's going on. So somebody knew what was going on, and they pretty much spoke on it to the president, and they basically said, so what can we do to basically make sure that this does not happen? Because we can't deal with another atrocity. We just had the fires. Okay, we got to build the city back. Okay, we got the World Cup as well as the Olympics. So what can we do to make sure we just nip this thing right now? And I'm sure his advisor says, let's send in the National Guard as well as the Marines. Now there are some acts or insurrection, opportunities for the president to use the pen to basically claim martial law. He hasn't done that yet. But just by sending in the National Guard and the Marines here in Los Angeles, regardless of what you see on television, these are, spot basically onesies and twosies. Okay, these are particular, on this street something happened. But if you span out, nothing's going on in the city, because on Sunday night, when the National Guard was pretty much into LA, to my understanding, it was to make sure that they didn't stop the economy of LA. They didn't stop the BET awards that was going on at the Peacock, which is formerly known as Nokia, formerly known as the Microsoft, okay, in LA Live. So you got supposedly riots in Los Angeles, but in the midst of all of that, you got the BET awards going on unhinged. That means it's not a riot. These are protests, and I would say civil unrest. Okay, but the federal government made sure that it does not escalate, and it hasn't. And this is a litmus. Bass, I agree with her. They use LA as a sample of what happened if we send in the National Guard and the Marines, and what will happen is they would just shut it down. And then because your federal jurisdiction is, see, LAPD is sit back and, they'll stage the perimeter, and they'll sit back, let people spit in their face and let people talk crap to them, and they don't move. That's it. But the federal officers, I seen a situation where they told them to move, and they didn't move fast enough, and he cracked him in the head with a wooden stick, that broomstick. But it was actually some type of riot or control mechanism, not your ordinary baton, not the ass, not the original baton, but It was a wooden stick with a handle. He didn't move fast enough, so it cracked him upside the head. And when he looked back and saw that he was a federal agent, he got up and tried to walk. So he cracked him in his leg again, grabbed him by his back. Somebody grabbed him by his backpack, tackled him, and arrested him. The feds don't play. So ICE is the feds. They don't need no warrant. They just knocking in, they down doors. So I can understand, really I can understand, but I feel your pain when you have federal agents that's coming and doing what they do. And then they'll get the whole town or the city or the building or that location, in an uproar, but then they'll just leave. And then they'll leave it to the LAPD and the sheriffs to sit back and deal with math. But the fact that the Marines are coming in, and I saw a press conference this morning that the Marines have the ability to arrest and detain. Their job is to protect life and property. And if they see something that's going out of control, they have the ability to arrest. They have the ability to detain. Okay, but this is the catch point. The feds, the Marines don't have a jail to go to, so they'll pretty much put them in a particular central location. And then the CHP get involved if they were on the freeways. APD get involved if they're in their jurisdictions. The sheriffs get involved if they're in their jurisdiction, and they will take them off to jail. It is what it is. So this era is over. The Trump administration is pretty much sending a message to the United States of America. You will never burn a city down again. And if you want to go to war, you're going to go to war and you're going to be domestic, and they're going to treat you like that, because when that federal officer bust that man upside the head with that stick, and when they put him in that paddy wagon, LAPD paddy wagon, took him right up to the county jail. And for the mayor after the fact, sit back and say, oh, I'm going to declare a state of emergency. Why are you declaring a state of emergency if these are peaceful protesters? That's the question that I have. Why is there a curfew? Are you guys mad that he didn't allow your controlled chaos? Are you guys mad at President Trump because he didn't let you burn LA down? Because we know if you burn LA down, you're blocking the blessings of the individuals that's trying to get through to the next level. That's all you're doing. You're trying to stop the progress of American citizens from having peace and tranquility in this country. And that's what the Constitution, peace and tranquility. That's what the Constitution says. So the governor and the mayor are being used as pawns to destroy their own people. Wow. There it is. There it is. Because up until COVID-19, the shutdowns, we know who controlled that, the shutdowns and all of that. We know about all of that. We're not going to get into it, but we had so much momentum going into 2019. But all of a sudden, put everybody in house, put a mask on their face, stop them from talking, stop them from communicating. And then we'll do it again when we feel necessary. Okay, let's get Harris to be president. She's not president. Now Trump's the president. Now let's do it again. But thank God for the federal government. To the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank God for the federal government, because they stepped in and made sure that the local and state governments not stop the progress of the people. And that Constitution says, we the people. We the people. That's what the Constitution says. Man, you guys lit up this the comments, but what do y'all think? See the correlation, or do y'all see the federal government versus the state and local government? It seems like the state and local government, wants to destroy it. And the reason why this claim can be made is because to get elected as the mayor, get elected as the governor, you have to have friends in high places. And these are principalities and these individuals, these evildoers in high places that we don't see. Because when I look at the mayor of Los Angeles, who reads, when she does a press conference, she's reading, and she didn't even proofread it. And he overreached, and he should not do this. And, he just made it worse. And the troops made it worse. I mean, come on. Who gave you that script? You're the mayor of Los Angeles, which is the most powerful individual entity in the city, surrounding cities and all of that. You're the mayor. And you have to read who wrote your script, who gave you that to read. And then when you look at Newsom, he's termed out, has gone rogue, and he has let his funders or finances or the eaves and high places that funds his campaign that I'm with you all and I'm just going to, lie. Because how is it that the governor had a conversation with the president of the United States and did not talk about federal troops, being deployed to LA to stop these protests from becoming riots? You should be applauding. This is how this thing works. You keep your friends close, your enemies even closer. Hey, Gavin Newsom press conference should have said, I'd like to thank President Trump for being proactive instead of reactive at this moment, because history and the data to show that on the third and fourth day of these tests, they become riots and sometimes we're overwhelmed. But by the swift work of the President of the United States, by bringing in the National Guard, by bringing in the Marine, pretty much loosed our local police departments, our local sheriff's department to pretty much do the crowd control and to implement a plan. And then the mayor of Los Angeles put in a curfew. Individuals that act out and that protest or deface property or threaten the lives of American people, more importantly, the law enforcement agents that are pretty much working and doing their job, they're going to jail. And it's quiet now. That's all you should have said. But you want to sit back, all crap, and Trump is an idiot. If you want to lock me up, bring it on. Bring it on, tough guy. You want to act tough because he made you look bad. That's what it is. He did the job of the governor. Just imagine if the governor pretty much put out a press conference in Sacramento and said, hey, I'm going to deploy the National Guard and the Marines down in LA because I don't want to see this beautiful city destroyed. We got the World Cup coming up. We got the Olympics coming up, and we just dealt with we just dealt with some wildfires, of historical, of an epic city. So we're not going to let that happen. So we're going to nip this in the bud. And if anything we learned from the Summer of Love in 2020 with George Floyd, that we can't let this thing get out of control. Because once it get out of control, that's when you have your right. When you're looting on Melrose and, the Fairfax district on Fairfax, when you're shooting, at the police, throwing, Beverly Hills. See, that was citywide riots. But right now, we're dealing with controlled chaos, and the president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, sent in the federal troops and made sure that this thing was nipped in the bud. And I'm happy, because he helped the working class to stand their ground, because this is our moment in history from where we are. We don't have to start all over like we did in 2019. Shut everything down. We had to start over. So this was a whole nother situation that they were trying to do, because when you start over and you thing down, then you're going to have to look to local and state government to pretty much in the bed and help you. And this is when they were going to give us our portion. And then we're going to sit back and say, hey, they stopped the raids and, we bring, so now we need aid. So now they're going to pass out this and pass out that, because that's how trickle down works for them. You tear it down, build and destroy. And you military people, y'all use the term change a nation build. So the Democratic Party is trying to regime change and nation build here in the United States. And the assassin's bullet was the catalyst, because if it didn't miss, a lot of people say it was fake, but I don't believe it was fake, because 3 people lost their lives, the shooter and 2 additional individuals that were in the crowd. So when that particular situation happened, I sat back and I said, whoa, we dodged the bullet, literally. And now, he's what he campaigned on. He's the first president to say, I'm gonna do what I said I was gonna do. Okay, I said on the campaign trail, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Okay, they debating that right now. It's going to the House floor. Okay, we didn't get the no Social Security in the big, beautiful bill, but it's Social Security enhancement. And then there's also some situations from a tax perspective to help the working class, meaning you don't have to pay taxes on the interest of your car loans. And there's some other, we'll talk about that down the road. But he ran and campaigned on that. He campaigned on illegal migration. He's doing his job. They stopped him from building the wall before and clown. Oh, he only built 100 feet of the wall now because he invested money in the border czar. Okay. The migrants and people coming into the United States is the lowest that ever been in the southern border. So he don't need a wall. He's deporting individuals. They deported the gang members first. If you don't remember, they deported the gang members first, took them back to Venezuelan prisons and got them out this country. Even told them that they could self-deport themselves, meaning we'll give you a plane ticket anywhere you want to go and $1,000. Could you imagine $1,000 being converted into some pesos or some other currency? That was a good thing. But since y'all thought he was playing, so now, we're going to come get you. They don't even know when it's going to stop. Okay, because when you came into this country, think about this, and you wonder, how do they know who to get or where to think about this? If you are a migrant that illegally came to the United States of America, you came to California, and then you came and you said, you know what, it's the land of plenty. Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass said I could come here, housing. Okay, so I got to put my name down on that housing. Okay, I get some Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, food stamps. Oh, I got to put my name down on that. And I do have to at least go to the DMV and get a driver's license or an I.C.E. or something. Okay, so with that information, they know who you are and they just pulling up. So when you sit back and say they're just random, they're not randomly. They're going to get the individuals that's on the radar, that's on the documentation. And if you did not know, California allowed 10 million immigrants to come in and get on public assistance. And this is why this is in the red. This is why the city of Los Angeles it has a budget, debt of $1 billion. This is why the governor up in Sacramento will not help the situation, because Gavin Newsom said on record that he's not going to fund, operations that don't work. That's what he told Karen Bass to her face. So we got to understand, what's going on. So the state is in the negative because of the migrants that benefited off of the resources. So those resources has been extracted. And now that we're running a budget in billions of dollars in a deficit, now we got to understand what's going on. So they're getting them up out of here. And like I said, I feel as a human being, the humanitarian in me is not right. Okay. But sometimes you got to deal with what you got to deal with. And this is what they're dealing with. And this is why there's no, large support. This is why it didn't become the summer of love of 2020, the Floyd. This is why it's not, citywide. This is why it's not going on the west side, the north side, the south side. This is why it's just right epicenter, which is downtown Los Angeles, in which it all starts from, and then it rolled over. But somehow, some way, they made sure that they stopped that, because when the average individual, whether you're a member of the LBG, you got an issue with illegal migration. You got an issue with crime. You got an issue with poverty. I don't care who you're from. The ACLU did not and is not supporting stopping ICE or protesting, because everything that they're doing is not hurting the city, it's helping the city. And my race, we've been through some things. We were stolen from our own land. Okay, we came to America as slaves. The Bible prophesied it that we will be duly oppressed and slaves for 400 years. That 400 years expired in 2019. So if you said 2019 from 1619 from 2019, that's years. And my spirit tells me this is why they did what they did, to shut it down, to stop the progress. And then now it's in office and they're trying to do it again because chaos keeps them in office. Chaos keep them credible. And it's sad that they're not working with the federal government, because a house divided can. And this is why I'm so proud of the 13.5 million registered Democratic voters that decided to either not show up on the polls this past November or write in a candidate. So that shows you that 13.5 registered Democrats are not with what the Democrats are doing. So now that the Democratic Party is on its last days and their democracy, and this is what it is, they're fighting for their lives. These senators, these elected officials are literally dying with the parties and the policies that they've been in their entire lives, because if they were made by the Democratic Party, they cannot switch up and, do something different now, because there's a price. You can't let the devil make you and then turn around and want to serve God without the devil breaking you. And this is why you find individuals like Sean Combs in jail right now, because he changed his name to Love. He repented of things. He tried to turn his wicked ways. But before you can actually work with Bouchon Glover and use your funding to help a better Black America and the bipartisan independent group, you got a price to pay. That's what. You got to come with us, because we are not going to let you help them. Okay. And by the grace of God, us, we're the them that in this equation, but we haven't souls. We're not in bed with them, so we can do what we so shall choose, and with no fear, because the ghost of Democratic past has expired a very long time ago. They do not have public lynchings anymore. They do not run around and intimidate anymore. They pretty much, their descendants put on masks and stuff, and they're anarchists, and they and do these protests and make them unpeaceful. That's their descendants, because the spirit is in them. Matter of fact, they have no spirit. That's their soul, the soul of their ancestors. Because I had a conversation with one, and I basically played him. I know how to code switch, and I was sitting, hey man, we got to stop this, bump Trump and all of this. And I started talking to him, and he pretty much, and I was like, man, where you from, Danny? A white boy named Dan said, man, I'm from LA, but my father, my grandparents from Mississippi. He said, from Mississippi. I said, man, a white man from Mississippi, you out here, with your mask on. I see your little pan, and you got a gas mask on, and I'm like, wow. Do you know your ancestors more than likely probably were clearly racist, but do you know they probably was clans? Because where did you get from? He thought about it. Took his gas mask. We had a conversation, and I'm sitting back and I'm saying, wow. So the soul of these antagonists, the souls of these white men, their ancestors were the ones benefited in the South through desegregation, the Jim Crow laws, the public lynchings, whites only this. And then you break it down to slavery, and then you break it down to their ancestors fought of the Confederacy to preserve slavery. So when I sit back and say, how is it that the Black man could be a Democrat? That is crazy. Because they sit back and say, if you can't beat them, join them. Because in 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson said, bring in Negro leaders. He brought in Dr. King, he brought in the civil rights leaders and signed every civil rights law known to man to make it that the Black man was going to be liberated. Because if you liberate the Black man, you're liberating the Black community. His families comes with that. But what he did was he liberated the Women's Live movement. He liberated the LGBTQ movement. He did Planned Parenthood. Margaret Sanger got her funding, to abort babies. He put money into the ACLU and all these things. And then what we call the trap, when they say trickle down don't work. See, trickle down didn't work then, because they sent Black men on the front line to fight in some war called Vietnam. And in Vietnam, they got hooked on heroin. Okay. Then they put in the fair system. Okay. Told the woman, hey, either you want a man, or you want the government or the county to be your man. And if you get with the county, we'll give you X amount of resources for your children. We'll give you subsidized housing. We'll look out for you. We'll hook you up. And then when the sister go look for a brother, he's strung out on heroin. He's jobless. He's trying to be a revolutionary and a Black Panther. Okay. So think about that trap, why the trickle down didn't work. Because in the midst of that, there was a whole lot of brothers, going to Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Pacific Bell at the time, working for the city, the county. They themselves up by their own bootstraps. So trickle down worked for them, but the trap destroys the data. Then you take that to the 70s. Same thing happened in The welfare system got real strong. They told you, listen, Miss So-and-so, if you have an extra baby, you have one more baby, you will get $800 a month in food stamps. Okay. But you ain't gonna have no man. But she probably had a man in the house, but they was playing the game, but he didn't want to document it or go on record, because if the man, would pretty much married her, then the state would say, hey, we can't give you that $800 no more. You got a man. You see the trap that they put us in? And then the sister sit back and say, what am I going to do? And tell the sister, well, you got to go to work. You got to get you some training. We're going to help you with the kids. Okay, we got that. Okay, but you got to go get you some training. You go get you now you got a single parent household, and boys are being raised without fathers and without leadership. So just like, the word says, an idle mind is the devil workshop. Okay, an idle mind is the devil workshop. So the devil's working on them kids, and now your kids get to go see their daddy on their 18th birthday, and that's the county jail. And that's real. That's the trap. And they do it every decade. Now they trying to run it twice in this particular decade, okay, because we already with the Summer of Love with the George Floyd riots, that was not only citywide, was nationwide. And now they're trying to do it again in 2025. No. We don't want that double up. So this is why community is separating itself from the two political parties. This is what this channel is all. We seek solutions and resolutions to create a better world for everybody. All y'all. It is what it is. So moving forward, we cannot, work in this two-tier government. This duopoly is not working for the people. And it worked for the evildoers in high places and the elected politicians, but it does not work for the people. Okay, so one of the parties got to go. And I'm on this right now. One of these parties got to go. So guess which one got to go right now by default? And it's by default because they're not in office right now. And they're the party that's the opposition of the United States of America. They are lining themselves up as the anti-American party. And if you're anti-American, you are the anti-Christ. And they saying these red MAGA hats is the red mark of the beast. So, we'll get into that some other time. Maybe it's a sign, for us to put the Lamb of God, the blood of the Lord, of our Savior, over our, bodies, so we can be covered by the blood of Jesus in these times, because it's not going to happen. You're not going to tear this country down. You're not going to tear the city down. Okay. There's no such as a peaceful protest, because when it gets dark, that's when the anarchists come out. That's when the individuals come out that the evildoers in high places funds. This is why you can see, and this is why locally somebody because they located the individual that passed out 20 gas masks. It's easy. Because our cell phones are digital locators. Okay, we have a social security number and an IP address. Mind you, they can hear us. They hear what I'm saying. So if you think you could do something, if they want to come get you, they're going to come get you. So this is why we got to tap out, because that burning house that Dr. King realized he delivered his people in out. And it's just like the Hebrew boys. We've been in that burning house for this long, but we didn't even get burnt. So let's go ahead and walk out with some pride, with our heads high, as nonpartisan independents. We didn't come to change the scribe or the Pharisee. We're not here to change the Republican or the liberal. We're here to fulfill, and to fulfill is the will of the people. And if we fulfill the will of the people, we're fulfilling the will of God. It is what it is. So I love y'all. In the comments, ultra MAGA, make again. So I'm down with MAG, make America great, because again, past tense, my people is in slavery. Okay. So make America great again takes us to a dark place. We want to make America great. We support America first. Okay. We support Caesar, which is the president of the United States. And if I have to step up and take the oath and be the pro temp mayor of Los Angeles, so I could go talk to the president of the United States to get some, then let's do that. Okay. And I'm pretty much speaking to Bass's office, because you need somebody on your team that has the heart and the courage and the moral turpitude to stand up 10 toes down and to speak with the federal government to make sure we get the assurances that we need to have a beautiful World Cup and to have a beautiful Olympics coming up and to make sure we rebuild the Palisades area due to the, well as the Pasadena, Altadena areas that pretty much destroyed a lot of lives. So with that being said, man, I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. Thanks for tuning in to a Better Black America TV here on YouTube. Politics Today, President Trump versus Governor Newsom versus Bass, because they had that he pretty much did their job, sending the troops, was proactive versus reactive, and made sure that these protests only became civil unrest and not full-blown riots. Now, I'm out of here, but they put in the comments, self-created victims. Okay, somebody put in, no one is abusing. Let me see here. Straight people is the in the section. You know, where's the illegal to be straight? Where is it illegal to be what you are actively currently? Like I said, sometimes in comments, you know, they'll take you on the loop. So you guys are debating back and forth. I'm seeing a lot of rainbows in there. So obviously you guys are having your own conversation. So with that being said, let me get on up out of here. And you guys have a beautiful day. I'm your host, John Glover. Thanks for tuning in to a Better Black America TV on YouTube. Peace out.